Alrighty. So this is a really confusing topic that I'm trying to work through here. um, holy fuck! I just kind of went down this train, and I just figured I'd ask some questions just to give myself a little bit of a barrier around the whole fucking thing because it's pretty confusing. But basically, what I've been able to gather is that okay. There's two premises that we need to discuss. I am interested in critiquing gender abolitionism. My understanding is that it doesn't quite work unless you change the definition a little bit, or you just make it prima facie, perhaps. In other words, mostly applicable, or you're arguing for some utopia which perhaps we're just too far removed from, or maybe it is actually some solution that we should strive towards. But then, anyway, before I get there, let's just hop into this. So basically, I like social constructionism. That's fine to me. Gender is not determined by biology, but by social and cultural factors. So there's a couple ways of looking at this. But one, if you see somebody who looks like a girl, you're going to assume that they're a girl. If you look at someone, they look like a guy, you're going to assume they're a guy. That's how we assess what gender people are. We don't actually look at their genitalia. That's kind of a colloquial way. Another way you could look at it is, I made a video about this, but it's effectively the idea of social constructs altogether. So basically, if you have a word, and I did a video on this, but let's say it's block, right? And a block is a square object. And even then, that might not be a perfect definition, but whatever. Basically, there's a block, and this block has a bunch of different things associated with it. So we have the word block, which is a verbal identifier associated with the phenomenon that we're visualizing or experiencing, whether it be via touch, sight, or anything like that, really. So you have that. So you have the word block. Then you have the concept, and this is all baked in when we use this word. You have the concept of the block. Well, we'll put block concept, and then we'll put block ontology, which ontology is basically just what its actual existence is, effectively. So we have the word. We have the concept of a block. This is more like what we picture in our heads when we see a block. And then we have the ontology of the block, which is actually what the block's made of. So maybe this is a wooden block, and it's made out of oak wood or something, and it has paint to show the numbers on the block, like one of those toy ones you play with. But it's going to have this molecular composition that we are not perceiving. We are merely perceiving the macroscopic object of it, and that is what we picture of it. That's the concept that our senses allow us to associate with it. So that's the premise, and by that logic, virtually everything to some degree is a social construct. So whether that's race, gender, heck, the keyboard in front of me, the periodic table in front of me, or the periodic table, it could be the most scientific concept you can come down with. And there is a little bit of a chicken and egg game between the brain and the concept. So, or in the social construct, which comes first, which technically the brain generates our ability to think and perceive things, but we also have a social construct of the brain in conjunction with its actual biological ontology. So with that said, that's where we're at with this. So here's my critique of gender abolitionism, and it's very obscure. I think social constructionism is fine. That's not super controversial. I think if you want to make it a bit more biological, you could just say portrayal is a good word to substitute for this. like the way things portray. So it could be the way a block portrays, or the way a keyboard portrays, or the way, like, a person portrays, like what they wear, and whether it's makeup, nail clothes, or running shoes, whatever. With that said, gender abolitionism. Here's a decent syllogism for it. Like, premise one: gender is a social construct, not a natural or biological fact. That's fine. That's still so same as social constructionism. It's on the same. That's basically the same statement. So premise one presupposes this one. Premise two: gender is a source of oppression, violence, and inequality in society. This is also true. And the conclusion is, therefore, gender should be abolished as a social category and practice. So my understanding is this is true. So premise one is true, and premise two is true. But it's not always useful. Like, gender can have useful things. And the sports one is really complicated. Just because that gets into the whole whether transgender people should compete in sports, and that's really complicated and fun. But for brevity's sake, I won't hop into that and just talk about one specific use of gender, because abolitionism is a pretty strong word, and maybe if you are a gender abolitionist, this is not something that you would say, but it seems like you would have to argue at best it would be prima facie abolitionism, because it still seems like it's helpful to maintain these categories in regard to identifying oppressed individuals. So I'm a fan of CRT and a fan of trans people, so I'm just a fan of mitigating marginalization effectively. So if somebody is, let's say that black people are being suspended from schools more, right? Or maybe women are being kept out of hard science fields in academia. Well, so we'll go with the woman one, just because this is gender abolitionism and not racial abolitionism. But so let's say that gender, or that women have a proclivity to not engage in hard sciences like physics or STEM or something like that. It does seem like having the category of women would help us to be able to identify which group is being oppressed, because it's really hard to get rid of the notion of bias in people, especially with the conclusion that people are just naturally opposed to change. And so when you have a culture in which people are looking to regularly oppress others and keep them down, even if it's totally unconscious, like in the sense of like black people being disproportionately thrown in, or being accused of crime and being arrested in comparison to white people. Like, it's one of those things that's so deeply ingrained, it takes active work on our part to fix those biases effectively. So it seems to me like that is one use that could be used for maintaining gender in some capacity. So it wouldn't be like a total abolishment. Now, maybe if you could remove those biases from society, then maybe you could get to that point, but it doesn't really seem that within our biology, at least it would take so super long, like millions of years perhaps, I don't even know, but it seems like a really far-fetched idea to totally remove the proclivity for cognitive bias in regard to these subjects. And so I guess I just don't think that it's practical. And you could just argue like, okay, well, this is an idea, right? It's something that we want to work towards, but it's going to take us a hell of a long time to achieve, so we might as well start now. Perhaps, you could say maybe it's gender prima facie abolitionism, in which most qualities of the gender category are useless. Which, I think you could probably agree with that. Like, the more freedom you allow people in social capacities is generally better, at least in terms of utility. But yeah, something you could say maybe is to my objection is that when people stop oppressing each other, you won't need to use gender as a source anymore. But it does seem like it would always be good to have that safeguard there, just in case our biology did revert to that. And I don't really see a good attack about that or for that. Like, it always just seems like a useful thing to have, at least as like a fall case for us to categorize things. I mean, we use categorization for lots of things. Like, we use it for physics, we use it for biology, and there's still like uses for these things. And they might change, they might get better. Like, there's tons of different ways. Like, people have proposed different orientations for the periodic table. But there's always the famous one that we learn in chemistry class, high school. So yeah, I don't know. If you have any critiques to this, I'd be interested to hear them. It's kind of a fun topic and really confusing if you're not familiar with social constructionism. But yeah, it's a fun concept. So with that said, I'll call it there. And if you have any questions or concerns or think I missed anything, just comment down below, and I'd love to talk about it. Alrighty, I'll see you. Bye.